and Beyond. Thank you for being here. This is an accumulation of a lot of what got me here and what I do in practice and why I do it. My story started out with looking back, not knowing it, I was very, very stuck in sympathetic overdrive and the stress, fight or flight side of my nervous system. From sports, from birth control, from all sorts of things that I just didn't know at the time were doing that. I was in chiropractic school and had picked up on the fact I loved cycle health and like those kind of things. I was no longer on birth control but also preventing, and all of a sudden I was like, I'm not ovulating. And I did a liver cleanse and I thought I was ovulating, but it wasn't strong enough ovulation test to release an egg, and we didn't want kids at the time, so I was just kind of trying to figure it out on my own. And then I had an HRV test done at a seminar with my now mentor back in Kansas City, and he looked at it and he goes, you're gonna have trouble conceiving. And I'd always wanted to be a mom. His bedside manner is a different topic, but I was just like shell-shocked. I'm like, I wondered that, but I didn't know that, like what on this makes him think that. And I kind of dismissed it, and 4 months later I lost my cycle completely. So I went to him and I was like, hey, I don't really want kids right now, but like clearly my cycle isn't conducive to that, like what do we do? And we started chiropractic care. Rather frequently, eventually it was every 2 weeks. And 3 months later, I had a chemical pregnancy, which is really interesting in the sense of like the egg that was maturing when I was starting care and had my loss of cycle was the egg that ended up being part of that loss. And then 3 weeks later, I conceived my son, and he's now 2.5 years old. And so that was my story. I am a neurologically focused chiropractic fertility success. And I'm so thankful that that came into my world, and that was now almost 4 or 5 years ago, and I had no vision of being in this world doing this stuff at the time. At the time I was surviving chiropractic school and was doing what was coming with that, but I really fell in love with it and realized that that's an option for parents. Whether they want to do it, they want to try it after other options, or if it's what they want to start with because it's least invasive, it is an option for parents to explore. And there's a little bit more throughout my story sprinkled into this that will make more sense now that you know that. So today we're going over kind of what the perfect storm is, how we do our best to prevent this, where it starts in the nervous system and why, the importance of the nervous system balance, co-regulation, how powerful it is, the benefits of having a nervous system regulated during pregnancy, what's going on with each baby during the trimester of nervous system development side, and then the first step in creating the nervous system and how important your circle is. Questions are of course welcome throughout, but there will be time at the end. And then this is nothing new to our midwives, that birth is very, very medicalized. Recently, not only birth, but also prenatal care. There's a lot of common non-normal within this that we see kind of the cascade of interventions in the last 5 bullets play a role in sometimes affecting normal physiological birth, and by all means in some situations they're necessary and needed, and it's all about mom's choice, but we have the option to change this and reduce the likelihood of these things for moms that isn't their plan or that isn't their desires in their heart for their birth. And it's really important to remember here that America is first in emergency care, absolutely first, and near last, if not actually last, when it comes to maternal mortality in the birth world. So that's something really important to remember, is there are things that we do very, very well in the medical world here, and there are some things that we don't do as well. And it's important to recognize that and know those things going into it to help optimize your experience. All right, so the perfect storm. Typically, if you dive into the PX docs world, it talks about a lot of this with kiddos, and they're well down the kind of compounded stress that's been stuck in their system for a while. It never got the chance to clear out. They never got the chance to be in that rest and digest side of their nervous system. But we notice in those kiddos that it comes back to prenatal, even sometimes preconception stress, of where that first exposure to high stress was. And then we see things like interventions and birth traumas that skyrocket that stress in an baby system. And when it goes further down, what's really common to see in this cascade leading to the perfect storm is it starts with something like maybe there was breathing issues at birth, but then there was latching issues, and then we had the colic, and then we had the ear infection, and then we get 3 years down the road and now we have behavioral and bedwetting, and now we're trying to start school and we're getting the diagnosis and no one can figure out what's going on, and you're removing dyes and you're changing this, trying to support your child, and it just becomes this perfect storm of cascade cascading, compounding stresses that are encompassing their nervous system, and they just cannot get out of that fight or flight. So when we come into the birth world of this, we start looking at how can we support mom in preconception and prenatal health when it comes to stress to help mitigate that foundational layer that is sometimes the starting point for these kiddos' perfect storm down the road. And of course, we try our best to avoid this. Empowerment and knowledge is a big part of this whole thing. When you know your options, you can truly know your options and make the decision that you feel most confident in and empowered about. When we get into preconception work and preparing in advance, mom and dad both matter, both parties. We have the emerging research with the sperm health playing a role in early loss, and it's a lot bigger role than it has ever been notified or recognized recently or previously, but coming out now and realizing that dad's sperm health plays a crucial role because it helps and is the key factor in developing the placenta. So when we do that, and then we have mom doing everything trying to figure this out, but it's still not getting there. Sometimes that dad is the missing piece, and we need to get that on the same page and help him too. And then we have the nervous system health, that the nervous system controls every cell and organ and tissue in mom and baby. It's the first thing to develop in utero, and it is the inside out approach to all of this. We can do a lot of things outside in to support efforts and do this, but when something is stuck, rooted in the nervous system, and that's what everything is building upon, we can go in non-invasively, and work inside out to restore that and just maximize the potential and capacity of the nervous system to be adaptable and make these changes and do these things that our bodies are meant to do and know how to do. Sometimes they need a little bit of release stress or get that stress out of the system to then be able to perform at their max capacity. At the end of the day, pregnancy is a increased load for the system. And if we have limited capacity to do that, and then we add more to it and we exceed what our body is ready for, at those times we can see complications arise, or why do some women get sciatica and some don't? When we are putting more tax and more load on the body to function, whether it's blood flow, heart rate, heart capacity, all that extra work, having a imbalanced nervous system at the root of it can be a factor in how smooth that goes. If we have max capacity and we add more, we're still functioning well. If we have limited capacity and limited adaptability, and then all of a sudden we add 30-50% more of that, it can affect how well the nervous system carries out those actions in a normal physiological process. And of course, your circle matters. Surround yourself with people who protect your vision for birth, who support what you're doing, whether they agree or not, and have providers that can walk you through your choices, your options, and going through that route. Now, the importance of a balanced nervous system, a regulated and adaptable nervous system, is the most important during that preconception, pregnancy, and postpartum. There's a lot happening there. There's a lot going on, and we're not in this to completely remove stress from your life. That's not possible. It's about creating the environment that has the most capacity to handle it and the most adaptability to handle it. When we go through this, we have the autonomic nervous system, the two branches, sympathetic, fight or flight, and parasympathetic, relax, rest, regulate, and reproduce. And we want to be in that parasympathetic more often during preconception, pregnancy, and then even postpartum when it comes to co-regulation with mom and baby. But it's also important during those times that we still have the ability to switch into sympathetic. We just have the option to get back to parasympathetic rather than getting stuck over there or starting stuck over there. The different layers that can those stresses, we see them as chemical, we see them as emotional, we see them as physical. Those are all things that we encounter on a daily basis. And a balanced nervous system is not about no stress and all rest and relax. It's about one that can go back and forth without getting stuck on either side. When it gets stuck, depending on when or where or how long, it gets stuck and then fixated and then sometimes buried as other things pile on as we go through life and experiences as humans. When we get into the nervous system and the flow chart of this, we have that brake and gas pedal on the left and right, and the brain is telling the body what hormones to make. On that brake pedal side, the rest, digest, regulate, reproduce comes into the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and over to the reproductive organs. This is the HPG, the gonads. We've got the testes for testosterone, spermatogenesis, and the ovaries with progesterone and estrogen. And that's where we want to be and feel safe to be when it comes to conception and prenatal time periods, and even when we start labor and delivery, the process of that. But on that gas pedal side, we see where it picks one. We're not meant to be able to fight for our lives and procreate at the same time. We have that survival and that protection in the fight or flight, and that comes through the central nervous system, the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and over to the adrenals with the cortisol and adrenaline. Now, what's my favorite part about all of this is even when we come into labor and delivery, we start on that brake pedal side. Safe, things get moving, we go through the process, and then as it builds into active labor and transition and the final moments of before you meet your baby, our nervous system shifts into the gas pedal side and it gets the job done, and it happens, and then very quickly afterwards we come right back to the brake pedal and you get to caress your baby and you're latching and you're holding and you're doing all these things, and like all the endorphins are coming and you're doing all of that, and that beautiful gas brake that makes this possible is something that having a balanced nervous system can make that smooth and easy, and it flows back and forth upon demand rather than maybe labor stalls, or it starts but it doesn't quite get there because it doesn't feel safe and we're not sure why it doesn't feel safe, and we're kind of confused in that element of our body's confused, not us as a person. We're confused, we don't know why it's starting or why it's stalling, and it really comes down to this, like when we're on that fight or flight side, our body thinks it's running from a bear, and if we really need to run from a bear, we want that. We need that. It saves us. But we have to be able to be safe from the bear, know the bear's away, and calm our system back down. Truly, it's really interesting to see sometimes, like, you would think like, oh, I feel pretty relaxed or whatever, and then we get an inside look with our inside scans and it lights up in sympathetic overdrive, and we start piecing together something like, oh yeah, that does happen. Oh yeah, that does happen. And we realize like, okay, like maybe outwardly we were pretty calm, but our body was, whether it was we have a short fuse or we have different things that showing us that that capacity is limited, or even that adaptability. And again, I mentioned the nervous system has to feel safe in order to create and sustain life and go through that. This is probably my favorite slide because I love the flow chart. And I realized looking back, I'm like, duh, I was stuck in the gas pedal. I was a college athlete and I didn't eat well growing up, and I probably didn't eat enough for being an athlete, and I was like, yeah, my body was trying to survive. Like, of course that was happening. And then we get into what nervous system dysregulation can look like in mom. And subluxation occurs when the nervous system has become overstressed and out of balance. Essentially, something blows a fuse in the area. It's most commonly upper cervical. That's where the most dense neurology is in the whole body, per like size and capita. Transition zones, where our neck becomes our back and where our back becomes our low back, are pretty common. But it becomes overstressed and out of balance. And that nervous system dysregulation refers to a malfunction or imbalance within the system from high levels of stress, constant activation of the gas pedal beyond that fight or flight. And commonly, we see there's a lot of fight or flight, but it's more or less because sometimes that brake pedal is just not powerful enough to slow things down. And this is like the default. The gas pedal is the default of what's going on. We gotta turn on that vagus nerve, that brake pedal side of it. And we see here how this can contribute to some really common, but not necessarily normal complications of pregnancy, and how even some of these, when we increase that demand and increase that capacity past what can be handled, we can even see things go into things like sciatica or preeclampsia, and we see that build up in moms where all of a sudden the flip switches, and now we have something to deal with that seemingly came out of nowhere, but what was the chance of we hit that moment where the capacity became too much. And that was where we see, like, so when you see like elevated blood pressure, but it's not pre-E, but we got to pay attention to it because it could flip to that pretty quickly. And we're watching that line of like, where is that capacity? Is mom gonna deliver before that capacity switches? Or does something else externally in life happen, not related to pregnancy at all? And that was the moment that it flipped, and now we are in this moment there. We need intervention and we need to get this taken care of so that mom and baby are both safe. And we can deep dive on those at the end or whenever. There are some really interesting articles that I have to share with follow-up with those and how the autonomic nervous system plays a role in those. But now in baby, on the other side of this, it's really common to be like, why baby? You know, of course baby is being grown and supported by mom, but that umbilical cord not only doing nutrients and oxygen is also a power cord. And mom's nervous system is what baby's nervous system is learning. And I thought this was really interesting when preparing for this. I learned that there is a placental safeguard to cortisol, 11 beta dash, I think it was 4323, that chemically changes cortisol to not be able to get to baby. However, we've learned that that safeguard can get overwhelmed, and it's meant to combat surges of things that happen in life, and we're supposed to be able to come back down. It's not a constant flow of cortisol that this 11 beta is trying to combat and gets overwhelmed and overtaken, and then we have cortisol getting straight to baby and their developing nervous system. But that was a really interesting fact to me, that I was like, we have a safeguard in place to take care of those surges, but when we are living in constant high cortisol sympathetic dominance, it gets overwhelmed and depleted because it's not what it's meant to do. So that was really interesting to me. And then we get into the development of the nervous system in a baby in utero. We'll even see how that sympathetic stuff is developed way before the vagus nerve even gets a chance to start working and firing. And so that's what they know. That vagus nerve has to then come and teach them, and their vagus nerve is learning from mom's vagus nerve and her experience. So then at some point we end up, in some cases, with baby's nervous system taking a bath in stress hormones, and then mom's trying to teach baby, knowingly or unknowingly, how to use their brake pedal, how to use that vagus nerve. And we come on the backside of this, and maybe mom has super stressful pregnancy, maybe there was interventions that were necessary that were still stress. Stress is stress, whether it's good, bad, needed, necessary, or whatever. And then we have baby earth side with us, and we don't know why they don't stop screaming, and we don't know these things, and they haven't learned that they haven't had a chance to use their vagus nerve because they were in that sympathetic overdrive much longer, and that experience of the high stress, and now that's all they know. So then co-regulation becomes even more important down, and making sure mom's regulated so that she can help baby learn that and use that as co-regulation goes into the 4th trimester and well beyond into infancy. We'll come back to a lot of that a little bit on a different slide, but we see kind of the high stress, anxiety, and inflammation during that prenatal period, as long with like interventions and trauma and anything that happens, whether necessary or not. We see that perfect storm start, and that's when we get into the difficulty latching, breastfeeding, colic, reflux, constipation. Why are they screaming? We don't know. We've tried everything, that kind of world. And then we see that toddlerhood of the eczema and the respiratory challenges and asthma and allergies, and it just keeps building because the body never had that base of foundation to go back to in the rest and digest side of things. And then a balanced and regulated nervous system leads to, with the autonomic nervous system being in control, the better hormonal regulation and improved blood pressure, stronger immune response, improved emotional regulation, stress response, better sleep, and improved energy levels. Then we have that higher HRV, which creates that more adaptable system for mom and baby to develop in. And then we have beautiful co-regulation, because whenever we talk about, I remember this moment, my husband, before I knew any of this, I was still in chiropractic school, he was holding our couple-month-old baby maybe, and walking with them, and we had figured out that this deep monotone hum that my husband did was very soothing to our son. And he made the comment to me, he was like, I don't know why this works, but it does. And not even really thinking about it, I was like, well, humming stimulates your vagus nerve, so if you're laying him on your chest and humming, it's probably stimulating his too to help him calm down. And I look back on that and I'm like, yeah, I nailed that, but I didn't even realize that I really did, I was like, that was a really big aha moment looking back. I'm like, oh yeah, that's why that worked. That makes so much sense. And I mean, I look back at my pregnancies, because this is all after my pregnancies. I didn't know any of this during that time, which I was getting chiropractic care, but not necessarily in this light or reason. And I look back and I'm like, man, I was literally, when my son's nervous system was starting to develop, I was taking 26 tests in 4 days in 4 weeks in chiropractic school. One of them was part 4 boards. And then in my 3rd trimester, I was my 1st semester in clinic in school. And I'm like, I was doing 12-hour days constantly. The stress was there. And I'm like, wow, no wonder I didn't have him till a week and a half later when finals were over. My body was not ready for that. I look back and this all makes so much sense. And so sometimes I can feel guilty about man, that was a really, I didn't know I didn't know, but now I do, and that's where we see the pediatric care come into it, because there's been some things that we've had to work through with him, and even my daughter, which is a different story that we'll get into a little bit later, but I see that now from the aspect of looking back, I'm like, oh, this was part of their story. The prenatal stress was part of their story. I didn't realize it then, but now I'm able to support them and help them rebuild that. and do those things with a different light because now I know, rather than feeling like I messed up or anything like that, because we're still able to support them and do those kinds of things. And then we can this more about the co-regulation afterwards, and then the optimal development positioning for your growing baby, and as we go into labor and delivery with that break, gas, break throughout the process of that. And then mom and baby's nervous system. That's my son, the one that I just talked about, that was a very stressful environment in his in utero time period. But we talk a lot about postpartum. Baby's nervous system will mirror mom's and really mirror one of their primary caregivers. My son, I went back to school at 6 weeks. My husband was home 18 weeks. So they were very bonded, and it was beautiful. It's great. They're still super close. And there were moments I always remember, like my husband, maybe they had a hard day, or maybe Riker didn't sleep well, or whatever it was throughout the day. And I'd come home from school, 45-minute drive, got to decompress from school, whatever had happened in the clinic, whatever. And I'd come home and my husband's like strung out. He's probably almost in tears. My son's crying, and they're maxed out together. And I was able to take Riker, and it was almost immediate, to see that, like, a calm parent, like a dysregulated parent can't regulate a dysregulated child. And so when we reach our capacity and we hand off to someone who hasn't been through a stressful day or done those things, they're then able to help the child co-regulate and do those kind of things, which I've heard that many times before I ever had kids, and it was really beautiful to even see, like, whoever's having a hard day, like, it's not, the baby doesn't not love you. They need that calming sense to come into their body and be like, oh, that's how I do this. I do regulate like this. That makes sense for them. And that's where we see, like, it's important for the whole family to have that regulated nervous system, be able to step away when they need to, and those kinds of things throughout the process, especially when an infant is still learning the co-regulation. And genuinely, they're still learning that well into even toddler years. I mean, my 2.5-year-old, there's still moments where he just needs picked up, held, and reminded. Like, it's been really fun recently because he started repeating things back to us. Like, he'll tell me, like, Mommy, you're safe. Mommy, it's okay. And I'm like, that's so precious. Like, Mommy's okay, I promise. Like, we're, whatever conversation my husband and I were having. But that's been really interesting to see kind of that co-regulation start to pick up for him as he approaches age 3, which is crazy. So then we have baby in development. Week 3, their nervous system starts. A lot of women might not even know they're pregnant at that point, and it's already developing in their nervous system. And it starts with the brainstem and then goes all the way out, and it builds back, forward, bottom to top. So a little backwards of how we might think about it, and that's how development goes to after they're on Earth side to do that. And we have then major organs, and that's sympathetic nerves. They develop in week 6, and if we drop down further, we see the vagus nerve doesn't myelinate till week 26, almost 2/3 of the way through. And I will never forget, maybe this is when I became so, infatuated with the birth world. I sat down in my embryology class in chiropractic school, and the first thing that this professor said was that if you put it into a statistical calculator, what needs to happen, when it needs to happen, in the order it needs to happen for a child to be conceived and then grow all their organs in the first trimester of after conception, a statistical calculator would tell you it's impossible. But we all sit here. And it was just like this, like, aha of, like, man, like, it really is a miracle to get to experience that, to do that. I think it's really easy to lose sight of that because we're all here. Like, it's happened. It's happened billions of times across the world. But we, like, that first over half of the pregnancy is that sympathetic side of, like, baby is fighting to live. They're fighting to survive, and they're doing that in that overdrive of building organs, and, like, oh, that's high demand. They're doing all of that. And then that vagus nerve myelinates, and that's when mom's system really gets to teach baby system how to use that vagus nerve and that brake pedal and go from there as it then hits rapid acceleration in 3rd trimester with the immune system and brain development and lungs. And then once full term and their birth, the autonomic nervous system fully develops with that more co-regulation. And then into week 40, we see the vagus nerve further develop as well as the immune system. And it's just really awesome to look at how we can take care of mom and support baby in this growth throughout the process, knowing that baby's nervous system mirrors mom. And then why baby should be adjusted after birth. I'm actually really excited to hear because I've been meaning to send you a voice message about this. This is my daughter. She was a home birth. My first was a hospital birth, if you noticed that. Even the most peaceful birth can be a stressful event, and we don't realize it. My daughter is the epitome of that. She was born super fast. I didn't even quite realize I was in labor by the time she was being born. my midwife missed it just because it happened so fast. And she was born, it was great. She sounded great, she yelled, she did all the things, but she was born really, really fast. And one contraction, water broke, bloody show, and she was crowning all at once, and one more push, and my husband was holding her. So it was really, really fast, which everyone's like mad at it. Oh, it's so great, which it was, and it was quick and it was smooth, and I'm very thankful for that. But what I didn't know then is that she missed that innate squeeze that happens around when their shoulders pass through, being wider. And I didn't know this then, but with fast labors, we really commonly see a T2 subluxation in babies, and they didn't get that squeeze in there to really kickstart their lungs and that neurological input that controls their breathing and those kinds of things. And I've had so many aha moments with her in that case, because even then, like, I remember my midwives had left a few hours later, and I sent them a video. I was like, Lainey's kind of sounds weird. Like, her breathing sounds weird, but it didn't happen my first. I don't remember it with my first, and I'm not sure where this like weird breathing's coming from. And they listened to it, and they were like, she sounds okay, like, we'll check her in the morning. Like, they weren't concerned about it, but I was like, it was different, and I didn't realize why, or maybe potentially why. And she had already been adjusted at that point because she had some pretty significant head deformities, and we already weren't able to latch on one side. So she'd already been adjusted, but I was focusing very cranium and upper cervical. I didn't even think to go down into her thoracic spine by her shoulders, or know that she missed that innate squeeze when she shot out like a rocket. Like, I didn't know that then. And so now I look back and I see, like, when I did get into her T-spine, looking back, I'm like, man, I would adjust her and it wouldn't stay. We would see the same things back 2 days later. And it was on repeat. And anytime she would go for a milestone development, it would all come back, which growing is stressful. So that's common to see their subluxations reappear. But what was I missing? Like, it wasn't clearing. What were we missing? And it wasn't until I started this work specifically in this education that it dawned on me that I'm like, that's Lainey. That missing the squeeze, missing that T2 activation, like, that's probably why her breathing sounded weird. Despite screaming out of the womb and being pink and doing all those things, like, that's probably why it sounded weird. Like, she had to overcome that. And I didn't realize that then. And then seeing in her development, so then that was probably, she's about 6 months old when I put all this together and started working in that area rather than where I was seeing changes on the outside rather than knowing what could be on the inside. And when she went to go walk, we didn't have any of the signs show back up. So that was really cool to see that we found kind of that fundamental, that root that was there back in her birth story that connects and makes sense and does that kind of thing. And at the end of the day, we can't control everything. That will always stick with me because from the outside looking in, when I tell that birth story, that's peaceful. It was just me and my husband, and it was super low key, and all those things are true and great, but I didn't realize at the time, I did because of how deformed her head was and stuff, that it was really stressful and hard for her, but I didn't realize to what extent that we then saw that into development, into rolling and not be able to latch on one side and like those kinds of things. So what is neurologically focused chiropractic care and how is it different? I use insight scans. They are a personalized inside look at the autonomic nervous system. We have an EMG, we have a thermal, and we have the HRV, HRV being the most important during pregnancy. And this is telling us where stress is stuck. And then we get to be proactive and restore the foundation in the autonomic nervous system from the inside out, because the adjustment is not what does this. The adjustment releases the stress, removes the stress for the body to do it how it knows innately to do it. Then we also have, when we get into, on the other side of this, baby, 98% of babies in a study that's probably about 10 years old now are born subluxated when assessed at within their first 24 hours of life. And so that's something that we can get in there and support baby as well in that transition to outside world, breathing, doing all the things on the outside after they've grown and developed in the system. So it's really not something that it's never too late to support that foundation and do those kinds of things for mom or for baby. And then we get into the next steps being scans, and again, that emphasis on HRV specifically. This is what measures the capacity and adaptability of the nervous system and doing different things through the autonomic nervous system, the vagus nerve, and providing that insight to help us and support that brake, gas, brake flow of labor and delivery. What's really interesting is it's an older study, about 3 or 4 years, but it's catching some waves now in social media world of the HRV jumping about 7 weeks before delivery. And that's been really interesting to see kind of the mom's body prepare in that way and do those things. With the higher HRV, we see reduced maternal stress, improved sleep quality, improved cardiovascular health, enhanced immune function, and that maintained balance with the autonomic nerves that we've been talking about throughout this presentation. We see proper blood flow for the placenta and optimal fetal development. And then a lower HRV indicates a more stressed, which can lead to varying health issues, with the nervous system being the foundation and controlling all the cells, which can sometimes lead to a higher risk pregnancy depending on the mom's capacity to handle what is coming, whether it's in the pregnancy itself or outside world, other life things that are going on. This is what our scans look like. This is a stage of 3 for a mom, and we start out on that left side is a sympathetic side. She was decently imbalanced. She had a 55 on that score. We moved the balance from 55 to 75 to 90, almost 92, 91. And so that balanced her for the adaptability. And then the capacity, we went from 61 to 64 to 78. And 80 would get her into that green officially. But that capacity is like battery charge of how much have we spent and how much do we have to keep spending. So that was really awesome to see. And then we have personalized care. This is not a place that everybody comes in and gets the same adjustment and out the door you go. I use varied approaches, varied techniques, because it matters what is happening in your nervous system of how it gets adjusted. If it's angry and blown out and you're carrying a lot of stress there, we don't want to go in there with a big, heavy adjustment and make everything pop and explode. We're going to use things like a neurotonal release or an activator to do those kinds of things. But if there's an area that's fatigued and exhausted and we need that little spark to light it up, then we might use an HVLA or a drop table depending on where they're at in pregnancy and do those kinds of things, as well as ligament work and other things that support a healthy pregnancy, whether it's diving deep into the nervous system or we're staying more structural, looking at things like Webster technique and things like that. Something that we see for the first improvements in pregnant women are typically sleep, digestion, fewer aches and pains, less pregnancy brain, and more energy and focus. And then down the track of development, we see the benefit for both mom and baby as they progress throughout their pregnancy. This is Allie and her baby Goldie. I actually shared this testimony on the website page for this, and I'll just quickly read through what she talks about. She's actually a chiropractor herself, so it's kind of cool to see that early approach. But Allie and her husband chose to start care very preconceptually, 3 years in fact, and then 2023 they decided that they were ready for babies, and she continually got pregnant, and she said she was so grateful that she didn't experience any common symptoms, and she knows this is because of how hard her and her husband worked in that preconception world, in her viewpoint of that. And then they had an amazing home birth, and their daughter was adjusted within minutes of being born. She was born to 2 chiropractors, so that accurately makes sense. I mean, my daughter too. So that's really fun to see her in her story. And then we have Alex and baby Bowden, and this was more, if I remember correctly, baby Bowden got care after he was born. Oh no, Alex came and got care when she was pregnant, and her journey continued after delivery. And she wanted to prepare her body for labor and delivery. She knew that regular adjustments to chiropractic care would greatly benefit her pregnancy and therefore the arrival of her baby, and it did. She says her body adapted so well to the changes it experienced during pregnancy. And then she had a healthy and smooth delivery with baby Bowden, and now Bowden is now getting care, and he came in at 3 days old. And it looks like they worked a lot on the poop button and doing that and supporting him in that way throughout care. And then one more, Devin and baby Ruth. This mama came in to feel her best during her pregnancy. She says she came to a prenatal chiropractor at 18 weeks. She had started to have some tailbone and possible sciatica pain, and she believed it was from the relaxant coursing through her body at that point, which is definitely a factor. And she had learned about chiropractic care during pregnancy was super beneficial for her and baby, so she wanted a healthy foundation. It only took 1 to 2 adjustments for the tailbone and mild sciatica to be resolved. And then from that point on, all of her adjustments were focused on nervous system health around ligaments, any type of stress that she had felt on the days that she came in. You can see she was doing other things like yoga poses and stretches to help strengthen her lower back throughout the process. And then healing postpartum was a challenge, but with continued adjustments, she feels that her nervous system is getting care it needs to help keep her healing in the right direction. For her baby, her adjustments, she is pooping like a champ and moving away from the painful belly aches she was having as her digestive system gets the hang of working independently and learning that. So there's baby Ruth and Devin. And to close out, really, we're just talking about finding your circle. Who are you surrounded by? What providers are they? Are they speaking life into you? Is it stressful to go to them? Those kinds of things that you can be paying attention to, because it's not just about the physical stress on your body of pregnancy or even the chemical stress of managing two humans, but also the stress of your environment, emotional, having to get amped up to go to your appointment, or feeling safe to go to your appointment, or being filled with worry because there's just always this looming feeling of like, okay, what's next, you know? And you get to choose who you're around and find your team, whether it's doulas, lactation, midwives, OBs, whoever that you choose to surround yourself with. It matters. They need to support your goals, whether they agree or not, and be able to provide you information for you to choose, rather than you feeling like you're stuck and it's this constant roller coaster of emotional stress to navigate your pregnancy, as you especially get seen more frequently, and that's happening more often. So find your circle, prioritize people, and if you need to take a break from someone, then you just need to take a break, and you need to know that about yourself. And if you don't want to hear the traumatic birth stories, which I don't recommend when you're pregnant or trying to be pregnant or approaching labor and delivery, tell someone that. Or if they don't seem to respect that, or you don't feel comfortable telling them, distance from yourself just until you have your baby. Give yourself some space to really be in that safe environment for the most optimal delivery and labor that you can have. Next, if you're seeing this recording or you're here today, you have access to sign up for a free scan. There's also a discount code for your new patient exam to go from $195 to $95. If you're seeing this sent from Dr. Shelby and myself, or a different CA, you'll be able to take advantage of that as well, as you get the recording whenever we get that out to you, hopefully on Monday, as long as the YouTube upload goes smoothly. So, are there any questions? Do you have any questions?
No, you are amazing.
Anything to go back to?
No, I love it.
Okay, cool. That's everything. And I was gonna show you real quick. The reason I was so excited, I'm gonna pause that real quick, to the T2 correlation is you mentioned that baby to me